you have to preface any conversation about Russia or Putin with a denunciation of Putin and to say,
Right.
of course, he's a terrible person. But then I just realized, well, I don't really know that, but I feel compelled to say it because we're not allowed to have a nuanced and balanced discussion
Uh-huh.
when it comes to Russia or Putin. And then it makes you realize that this is clearly all by design, right?
Yeah.
This was all manufactured. And this was why though? Why so much energy, so much effort? Because clearly this is not something that just happened in 2022. It's something that's been going on for a long
Oh,
time.
yeah.
And then it just really ramped up after the SMO. But why so much energy, so much effort to demonize Russia and Putin? And then now we're in this situation now where, like I said, the Overton window has been moved so far that we
Uh-huh.
can't have a balanced discussion anymore. And that's what they wanted.
Yeah.
But it's going to backfire on us because now we can't negotiate. We're in this
Right.
situation
Yeah.
where people are afraid. World leaders that are involved in a conflict with Russia are like, well, we can't talk because that's just you
Yeah.
can't speak with the devil, can you? That's so
Yeah.
horrible. So
Exactly. Right.
now we put ourselves in this horrible situation. We did this to ourselves. So
Yeah.
why? Why?
Yeah. Well, let's say there's a rational side to this and an irrational side. I think the irrational component is the larger one here. But the rational is that, there has always been this recognition that Russia is a great power, or always is a potential great power, like the only power that really can counter the U.S. in Europe. And there are, there always have been people in the U.S. State Department that have seen Russia as the enemy, if for no other reason than that. It's just like, okay, we must maintain our dominance. To maintain our dominance, we need to cripple Russia because that's the one country there that could actually prevent us from maintaining our dominance. Just a crude geopolitical calculation. I think that does exist to some extent, that's always been a part of things. But then there's a large, I think, irrational component. There are people that just hate Russia, not because it's powerful, but Russophobia is something that goes way back. I started reading a book called The Russia Anxiety that I think that you gave to me on the recommendation of a viewer. I've had to set it aside because I'm now reading Provoked by Scott Horton, which is fascinating. It provides a lot of the background to the war. But anyway, it shows that this fear of Russia, irrational, exaggerated fear of Russia, really divorced from reality, even that goes beyond the crude geopolitical calculations, has been a part of the West, and especially Britain. You see it like even now in its most extreme form in Britain. It's been there. It's existed for centuries, and I don't think there's really an explanation for it. But there's a lot in human.
For centuries.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's the Crimean War, but even earlier, going back to the 18th century and earlier, it's always been there. And yeah, how do you explain it? I don't think there is a rational explanation. And I think it's kind of taken on just in a real extreme form in recent years and decades. And that just may be something to do with, I don't know, with a kind of the breakdown in the Western mental psyche in general. Maybe there's a sense, I'm just speculating here, but there's a sense that their world is coming to an end. I think they may feel, and I think that's true. It's just like the Western hegemony and the Western way of doing things and thinking things, that's been hegemonic for so long. I think is coming to an end. It's partly because of the rise of these other powers like Russia and China, India, and even Iran to some extent. But then it's also within the countries. I think the elite, which is had this ideology, which it's a totalistic ideology. It's not just geopolitics, but we're talking about social attitudes and so forth. That they've kind of reaching some sort of endpoint, and have becoming it's increasingly become divorced from reality, it's self-destructive, but it's an ideology that they bought into. And maybe it was like back in the 70s or 60s or something, when the West was really still very powerful, and there was still the influence from the older society. This new ideology wasn't quite so extreme. It didn't quite have the power, but within it were the seeds of its own destruction. You follow all these things to a logical conclusion, you reach these absurd points that we're now seeing. And now these people, the elite that bought into it, it's made it a part of their identity. It's part of being an elite in the West. You have these ideas about Russia and about LGBTQ and, all kinds of things about immigration and energy. We know what it is. It's the I call it kind of a pseudo left establishment ideology. Those part you having the right ideas about all these things, the right opinions, and believing in it. It's really what was, in a way, it's your ticket to joining the elite. And when it's become sort of a self-reinforcing process, right? It's just like if you rise up to the ranks, whether it's in academia or anywhere else, you understand at a certain point that, look, if I'm really going to make it, I have to buy into this. I don't think it's necessarily even a conscious decision. It just happens subconsciously. And asking open questions about it, which you really should do, because you can always make mistakes. You can go down the wrong path, and sometimes you need to go back. But it just become, when you do that, you reveal yourself as a traitor. If it's geopolitics, you're a Putin puppet, or
Right.
yeah.
Well,
If it's something about social attitudes, then you're one of the deplorables, and you just don't want to expose yourself as that. So maybe just to wrap this up, I kind of rambled a bit here, but I think that this Western elite, it has this ideology. It's become they kind of sold their souls to it, but at the same time, they have a sense that maybe this is coming to an end. There's a growing resistance within the West, within the U.S. and France and Germany, but there's also the rise of these other powers, and maybe they see the writing on one level. They see the writing on the wall. Now, if you're a rational person, you reassess what you're doing. But I think that they bought into a certain irrationality. And when you've really committed yourself to some irrational ideas, you lash out. When you have that, you actually kind of go even more extreme. You double down. And to make you so that you feel good about yourself too, you demonize, your opponents, your rivals on the world stage. That's part of it. It's just like, yeah, well, we're of course we're the good people. And this person is opposing us, so he must be the devil.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the conversation so far. I promise to only take 1 minute of your time. If you're using AI, please consider checking out my website, novlisky.io. Right now, we're in the middle of this AI arms race. Nobody knows what's the best AI to use. Yesterday was OpenAI, and everybody's talking about DeepSeek. This is great for us as consumers of AI, but what's not so great is having to jump from platform to platform. You don't want to have to sign up for a monthly subscription on OpenAI and then move over to Anthropic and then move over to DeepSeek. So what we built here at Novlisky is an AI hub. It allows you to access hundreds of AI models. We update them as soon as a new model comes out. It is integrated into our system, and you can use them all under one platform. And another thing that's so great about this website is that you can easily use multiple models at the same time to compare which is best for whatever use case. So, for example, I'm going to use Anthropic and GPT-4 at the same time. So I get side-by-side results. I use this in my work every single day. I think you'll find it incredibly useful. There's tons of customizations. We have an iOS and Android native app as well, so you have seamless synchronization across all devices. So please check it out. I think it's something you'll find incredibly useful. There are no subscription fees, no rate limits. I guarantee you it's going to save you money, and it's just going to keep you on top of all AI releases.
well, I understand, some of these things that you mentioned, these ideologies, the green energy, immigration, LGBTQ plus. This is all pretty much a modern phenomena, and I can understand how it's kind of got wrapped up and people haven't had time to really process, understand what we're in right now. But something like hating Russia, you say, goes back hundreds of years. why? How does that happen? Why does the UK hate Russia so much? It's like, is it something like, oh, I know, son, I hate Russia, you know? So they just pass that on from generation to generation. It just doesn't make sense to me. Like, well,
Yeah,
why have that hatred? I mean, it would even make more sense for me to see why people might hate China. I think it's wrong because there's a racial component in there, and I think that sometimes it does play a role. But it just seems like here it. What is it? Why? They're long
yeah,
ways away from you. You know,
yeah,
they don't seem
yeah.
to be bothering you. It's
Right.
like,
Well, I don't really have a very good answer. I'll finish this book at some point, and maybe there is an answer that he attempts to provide. Right now, he's just describing a phenomenon that does exist, that does have its roots, in past centuries. I don't think it was ever as extreme as it is now. I think it's just been tied in with other things. And again, the only thing that that's rational and maybe kind of is this the one rational component, semi-rational anyway, that kind of gives a boost, an impetus to this irrational hatred of Russia is the fact that Russia is a great power, and it potentially could dominate, theoretically anyway, Europe the way that no other European power could.
so have we seen this type of demonization historically? You know, because I mean, of course, we can talk about, of course, Hitler, but that was like
Right.
one, he was on his world conquest rampage. I don't know if there was this demonization built up prior to Hitler's invasion of Poland or anything like this. Is this normal? Because, like I said, it does feel completely manufactured, and you're saying that there's this deep-seated, long history of hatred towards Russia, this ideology that you almost have to subscribe to rise the political ladder in the West. But have we done this to other world great powers? Like, is this a standard practice? Just a method that we use just to say like, oh, we just know that this guy's completely evil, and we don't have any actual discourse about it, intelligent discourse or nuanced discussion about it.
Yeah. Well, you say like in recent history, like for example, throughout the Cold War, it's not something we did. We didn't demonize Soviet leaders. It was, we it was openly ideological. Ideological. It's just say that this is where we have two different systems. It wasn't a hatred that was directed against the leaders of the Soviet Union or the people of the Soviet Union, and that really has changed. Quite unfortunately, is that for some reason it's become very, very personal. I mean, a lot of it is hatred that's directed against the Russian people. Let's be honest, and the you can see it, openly. It happens. Certainly in like the early months after the start of the war in 2022, symphonies or symphony orchestras chose not to play Tchaikovsky, that kind of thing, or removed Turgenev from the reading list. I think less of that is happening now, but one thing we see is that it continues and it in fact accelerates within Ukraine. It's just that it seems like at least every week, you hear about a statue being toppled or a plaque being removed. It's just an erasure of Russia from Ukraine. And the fact that there is just no response whatsoever and suppression of the Russian language, which is ongoing in Ukraine and has intensified, and that there's simply no complaint within Western European capitals. It tells me that, they're complicit in this. They have to know at some level what's going on, but they make no comment about it. And, they're supposed to be about the rights of minorities and, champions of diversity. This is supposed to be exactly the thing that they're supposed to protest about, and they don't. And, you can say, well, maybe just because it's wartime, but it preceded the war. This hatred has existed. And again, I don't think it's rational. Part of it is just that, maybe it's places like Ukraine that so desperately wanted to break away from Russia and become part of the EU, the Baltic states, and Poland. That formerly were, you have to say, kind of colonies of Russia. So they do have this historical enmity, but it's kind of metastasized into something that's divorced from current realities, and that historical enmity that's has been passed on to countries that didn't in the West, has spread into other parts of the West. It just shows that, we don't, like the French don't need to hate Russia, but they've allowed themselves, or a good portion of the population anyway, the elite, let's make that clear. I think there are a lot of French people who do not hate Russia, but the elite have adopted this. They've accepted, they've been very willing accomplices to the hatreds that are coming out of parts of Eastern Europe. Yeah, I mean, in the end, some of these things you just don't know why, but it's just there. It's.
Do you think
just observing the behavior of an individual, you can analyze and you can point to certain causes, but in the end, sometimes behavior is just irrational.
I guess it's not a fully satisfying answer.
I know. I'm sorry, but I think that's the honest answer. Somebody's going to give you something fully satisfying. This is why. Is not really telling you the truth.
Yeah. Okay.